Not too much really. It's not been a great year in general, so there's not a lot to take from the year in general. It's the fact that I survived it. Probably that's about it.
Is Hamilton frustrated with Mercedes? "I am done with this," Hamilton said after the 2024 Saudi Grand Prix. Mercedes have to do a lot for Hamilton before the 2025 Australian GP. Come, let's analyze. Mercedes had a very disappointing weekend in Jeddah when Hamilton's P9 finish didn't give the silver arrow. Lewis Hamilton believes Mercedes has to make big changes to the F1 car beyond the widespread overhaul already made for 2024 after a difficult start to the new season at the Saudi Arabian GP. Mercedes followed up 5th and 7th place at the Bahrain season opener with 6th and 9th place in Saudi Arabia. 6th place George Russell finished 42nd behind Victor Verstappen in a 50-lap race that featured a brief early appearance from a safety car. At the scene of his last victory in Formula One in 2021, Mercedes' Lewis Hamilton implored his team to address issues with bouncing after qualifying P8 for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. The 7-time champion, who heads to Ferrari next year, made his feelings clear after qualifying, telling the media, "We've got to fix it. That's like 3 years in a row." Yes, even though there are so many elements of the car which are better, he added, "It's just we're being hindered by the bouncing that we have through 6 to 7, 8 to 9, 10, which I think probably affected George, and it's something that they've not been able to fix." Hamilton endured some leery moments throughout the weekend at the Jeddah International Circuit, notably narrowly avoiding the wall after a big snap of oversteer in FP2. Hamilton was still battling with the W15 as he wound up 8th on the grid, locking out the 4th row with teammate George Russell in 7th. Hamilton ran behind Russell in the opening stages before trying an alternative longer-running strategy and eventually finished 9th. And he admitted the performance of the new W15 around the high-speed Jeddah track had felt familiar after similar difficulties in 2023 and 2022. "The car is relatively good in the low speed and not so bad in the medium speed, but in high speed we're miles off," Hamilton said. It was like Hamilton was in a different category when he was going through the high-speed chasm between the other guys around him. It's frustrating for sure to be in almost the same position for almost 3 years in a row. It's definitely tough, but we will get our heads down and keep working away. I know everyone back at the factory is pushing as hard as they can. After all these criticisms, it seems like Mercedes has changed direction with its approach to the current ground effect cars for this year, describing the W15 at its February unveiling as a complete relaunch. But Hamilton doubts they may not have gone far enough. Well, let's see. "We've definitely got to make some big changes," added the 7-time champion. "We haven't made big enough changes, perhaps. If you look at the 3 times ahead of us, they still have different concepts than we do in some areas. So we've got some performances to add, that's for sure." Running behind Russell in his 8th place grid position at the time of Lance Stroll's crash and the lap 7 safety car, Hamilton was one of a handful of drivers not to pit during the 3 laps in which the race was neutralized, and this left him up running 3rd for the lap 11 restart. And although he was soon passed by Perez and Charles Leclerc, Hamilton impressively stayed ahead of Oscar Piastri for 20 laps, despite the McLaren having the advantage of fresher tires. He eventually pitted on lap 36 to set up a final short stint on soft tires, but with Lando Norris just ahead of him in the same strategy and impressive Ferrari debutant Oliver Biermann ultimately out of reach for both of them, Hamilton could not make up any late ground. Nonetheless, he had no regrets, saying, "I think it was worth trying something different. We're splitting the cars and trying different strategies, and ultimately, that's always the goal, to do something a little bit different, particularly when we're in the position we're in. I was fighting as hard as I could to go long, but I was hoping for a safety car or something, but it was just unfortunate, nothing came out." Hamilton's 7th and 9th place finishes represent his worst start to a season in points terms since 2009, and he added to the media, "I wouldn't say I'm having fun. I'm racing for 9th, or finishing 9th is definitely not fun." I am enjoying the actual racing part. I was hunting and I was pushing as hard as I could. I was maximizing everything I had in the car. I was right on the edge. Unfortunately, it just really lacked performance at the high speed, where they are walking all over us. But according to Hamilton, George was doing a great job. He was a lot more comfortable in the car, but Hamilton was a bit similar to the last couple of years. We made some changes overnight, and this morning, the car felt so much better. I was regaining this confidence again. When we get to qualifying, it disappears again. We've tried every setup change. We can't get rid of it, he went on. It was very difficult for Hamilton to explain. They even had some bouncing in Bahrain, but nowhere near as intense as Saudi. But that first sector is super high speed with a lot of yaw in the car and a lot of lateral load, and the bouncing really offsets the car quite a bit. Imagine when your car goes up and down in the back, your balance shifts forwards and rearwards. This is what Hamilton went through. If you're doing that 160 or 170 miles per hour, correct that each time. You know, the other Max Verstappen is flat through 6, 7 and 8, and the balance is just stable, and that's what we're working towards, said Hamilton. In between the chaos, Hamilton didn't forget to praise Behrman, who he knocked out in Q2 of qualifying by just 0.036 seconds, was generous in his praise of his compatriot, saying, "I didn't see his qualifying, but I think he did an amazing job in practice. Jumping into a car in P3 and delivering the way he has is really, really impressive. I'm really happy for him to have the opportunity. I mean, it also highlights that the car is pretty good, but great effort for today. And I'm sure tomorrow he'll have a great race." After the race, Mercedes boss Toto Wolff was prepared enough to admit their mistake. "I think there's a bigger factor with the lack of high speed than just the rear wing. Mercedes is missing downforce beyond the steps that they would have a bigger rear wing, which they had tried it on Lewis. There is something we don't understand. We are pretty quick elsewhere. We know that we have a smaller rear wing, and we are compensating for what we are losing through the corners. But it's just the high-speed variant where we're losing all of the lap time." According to Wolff, there is only little much you can do here. The one simulation's point is in a direction, and this is the kind of setup range that Mercedes can choose. You put the rear wing on, and he thinks you gain a few tenths or so if you get the setup right or wrong, but there is not a massive corridor for performance. It's more of a fundamental thing that we believe the speed should be there, and we measure the downforce, but we don't find it in the lap time. With a 2-week gap to go, the next race in Australia, Wolff added, "That's been 2 years, and there's something which we need to spot, and that's the thing to unlock. It's not because of the lack of trying. We push so hard, and we're going to give it a massive go now in the next time with more data to understand and come back to Melbourne stronger. So let's wait and see for a blast of the Australian Grand Prix. Do you think Hamilton's current complaints are justifiable or just tantrums about his inability? Comment your thoughts. Don't forget to share with your F1 buddies. For more updates, hit the like buttons and subscribe. Until next time.